Can you imagine working for someone for years without them truly seeing you? Until one night, everything changes. Marcela Dominguez never thought that a blind date with just $5 in her pocket would bring her face-to-face with her millionaire boss in the most unexpected situation of her life. A story that will make you believe in fate. Subscribe so you don't miss a single detail. Marcela Dominguez looked at herself one last time in the cracked mirror of her small room, feeling butterflies dancing uncontrollably in her stomach. At 24, she had never been on a real date, let alone a blind date arranged through an app. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the navy blue dress her friend Fernanda had lent her that morning. "My dear, you have to try it at least once," Fernanda had said with her usual mischievous smile. Marcela sighed, knowing she was right. For 3 years, she had worked as a housekeeper in the mansion of Gustavo Castillo, one of the most respected businessmen in Los Angeles, but her social life was practically non-existent. Her Sundays off were spent doing her own laundry or helping her mother at the market. Tonight would be different. Tonight, she would dare to dream of being chosen by someone. She took the $5 she had saved, her only fortune, and carefully tucked it into her small purse. The dress was a bit big on her, but the color complemented her brown skin and made her dark brown eyes shine in a special way. Fernanda had also insisted on lending her black low-heeled shoes, though they pinched a little. "Oh my God, what am I doing?" Marcela murmured as she applied some cheap lip gloss she'd bought at the neighborhood pharmacy. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She had only spoken to Diego, her mysterious date, through messages on the app for 2 weeks. He seemed sweet, hard-working, someone who might understand her simple world. He had promised to take her to a nice restaurant downtown, something that sounded like an unattainable dream to Marcela. She took a deep breath, grabbed the keys to her old car, and left her apartment with a mix of terror and excitement. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful. For the first time in years, she had hope. The drive to La Rosa Dorada restaurant in her little car felt eternal. Marcela turned on the radio to calm her nerves, but even the romantic songs made her more anxious. She had woken up early that morning to finish all her tasks at Mr. Castillo's mansion ahead of time. She had cleaned every corner of that enormous house with more care than ever, as if it were a good luck ritual. For 3 years, she had worked there without him noticing her beyond a good morning or thank you. Gustavo Castillo was a serious, elegant man, always focused on his business and important calls. Marcela admired him in silence, but knew they belonged completely different worlds. He lived surrounded by luxury. She could barely pay her rent. As she drove through the lit-up streets of Los Angeles, she couldn't imagine that tonight their paths would cross in the most unexpected way. The restaurant appeared before her like a golden oasis, with its warm lights and elegant couples coming and going. She parked her car, trembling, checked the reflection in the rear-view mirror one last time, and whispered a small prayer. Diego had told her he'd be waiting at 8 o'clock sharp at the table by the window. It was 7:55 when Marcela pushed open the heavy glass door of the restaurant, immediately feeling the contrast between her world and this sophisticated place. The aroma of gourmet food and the soft murmur of elegant conversations enveloped her like a cloud. The tables were adorned with pristine white tablecloths and lit candles, creating an intimate, romantic atmosphere. Marcela felt small amidst all that elegance, but tried to walk with her head held high, as Fernanda had taught her. "Excuse me," she said timidly to a passing waiter. "I'm looking for the table by the window." The man looked her up and down with a polite but assessing smile, clearly noting she didn't fit the usual clientele. "Of course, miss. Allow me to show you the way," he replied professionally, though Marcela detected a hint of condescension in his tone. She followed him through the tables, feeling the curious glances of other diners. Her heart pumped pure adrenaline as she approached the table that would change her life forever. The table by the window was empty, perfectly set for 2, with a spectacular view of the city lights. Marcela sat carefully, smoothing her borrowed dress and discreetly placing her small purse on the table. She checked her old phone. It was exactly 8 o'clock. Diego had promised to be punctual, and she wanted to believe in that promise more than anything in the world. The waiter offered her water, and she accepted gratefully, needing something to soothe her dry throat. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the glass and tried to breathe deeply to calm herself. From her seat, she could see the restaurant's entrance, waiting to spot a 30-year-old man, tall with a kind smile, as Diego had described himself. The first 5 minutes flew by as she mentally rehearsed everything she wanted to tell him. She wanted to share about her job, her simple dreams, her family in Mexico. She wanted to hear his stories, learn his passions, and discover if they could truly connect beyond their phone screens. Hope sparkled in her eyes like the candles illuminating her table. This was her chance to be happy, and she wouldn't waste it. But what would happen when the clock kept ticking and Diego didn't show up? By 8:15, the wait felt like an eternity for Marcela, who kept her eyes fixed on the entrance while pretending to study the menu. Her heart, which had been racing with excitement, now began to pound for a different reason: anxiety. Maybe there's traffic, she murmured to herself, clinging to any logical explanation to calm her nerves. The waiter approached the third time, asking if she wanted to order anything, and Marcela responded with a forced smile that she was still waiting for her companion. Her $5 burned in her purse, an amount that wouldn't even cover a drink in a place like this. She allowed herself to daydream for a moment. Diego would arrive, apologizing, explaining he had a work emergency. They'd order the most romantic dinner of her life and talk until the restaurant closed. Her fingers nervously played with the cloth napkin as she watched other couples enjoying their perfect evenings. A particularly elegant couple near her table laughed and toasted, and Marcela felt a pang of envy mixed with hope. Soon, very soon, she'd be living that magical moment too. But by 8:30, an uncomfortable feeling settled in her stomach, unrelated to hunger. Marcela checked her phone for the 10th time, hoping to find some explanation from Diego. The screen remained empty, no new notifications, only showing their last conversation from the previous afternoon, where he had enthusiastically confirmed the date. See you tomorrow at 8. Beautiful. I can't wait to meet you in person, he had written. Those words had kept Marcela awake for just 3 hours, buzzing with excitement. Now, they felt mocking, a cruel echo of hopes beginning to fade. The waiter passed by her table again, this time with less friendly expression, clearly annoyed by the occupied table generating no revenue. Marcela gave him a weak smile and asked for a few more minutes, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. The borrowed dress that had made her feel beautiful at home now seemed like a farce amidst all this luxury. The voices of other diners grew louder, their laughter more boisterous, as the entire restaurant was celebrating while she sank slowly into humiliation. By 9:15, Marcela could no longer ignore the reality looming over her like a dark cloud. Diego wasn't coming. For some reason she couldn't understand. The man who had filled her last 2 weeks with sweet messages and promises of a better future had decided to stand her up. Her eyes filled with tears she fought to hold back, biting her lower lip until she tasted the metallic tang of blood. I'm not going to cry here, she repeated to herself like a mantra. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, every fiber of her being screamed with disappointment and pain. The dream of being chosen, of being special to someone, crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. Her phone buzzed suddenly, and for a second her heart leaped with joy, but it was just a notification from her phone company. The cruel irony of the moment didn't go unnoticed. She had spent her last savings getting ready for a date that would never happen. The couples around her continued enjoying their perfect nights, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at the table by the window. Marcela felt invisible, as she always had been, as she perhaps always would be. The sound of her phone startled her at exactly 9 o'clock, and this time it was what she had been waiting for, though not in the way she had dreamed. A notification from the dating app appeared on her screen, and with trembling hands, she opened a message that would change her night forever, but not as she had imagined. Hi! Sorry for canceling at the last minute, but I can't waste my time with a girl like you. I don't think we're compatible. Have a good night. The words hit her like a physical slap, and Marcela had to read the message 3 times before fully processing it. A girl like you? What did that even mean? A humble girl? A girl who cleaned houses for a living? A girl who couldn't afford fancy dinners? Each word of the message was like a knife plunging deeper into her already wounded self-esteem. Her hand shook violently as she put the phone away, feeling as if the entire restaurant was watching her, as if everyone knew she had been rejected before even getting a chance. The humiliation was so intense it made her nauseous, and she had to grip the edge of the table to keep from swaying. Diego hadn't even had the decency to meet her before judging her. He had discarded her like trash, without a real explanation, without consideration for her feelings. The tears she'd been holding back finally rolled down her cheeks, and Marcela knew she had to leave before making a scene. She stood on shaky legs, grabbed her purse with unsteady hands, and began walking toward the exit with her head down. Each step was torture. Every glance she felt on her made her feel smaller. The waiter who had served her gave her a look of pity mixed with relief at finally freeing up the table. Marcela couldn't blame him. She, too, wanted to run from her own skin at that moment. As she passed between the tables, she heard whispers and giggles that might have had nothing to do with her, but her emotional state interpreted them as mockery aimed at the poor girl who had been publicly stood up. Her borrowed dress felt like a ridiculous costume, her tight shoes like instruments of torture. All she wanted was to reach her car, drive home, take off the clothes that had made her dream of being someone else, and forget this night had ever happened. But as she neared the door, something was about to happen that would change not only her night, but her entire life. At a discreet table in the back of the restaurant, a pair of eyes had been watching her all evening, eyes that knew her better than she could imagine. What Marcela didn't know was that someone had been a silent witness to her entire humiliation and was about to change her destiny forever. Marcela stopped just before reaching the restaurant's door, feeling her legs wouldn't carry her another step. Tears now streamed freely down her cheeks, smudging the little makeup she had applied so carefully that afternoon. A girl like you. Diego's words echoed in her head like a cruel song. She couldn't stop. She leaned against the wall near the entrance, trying to regain her composure before stepping out onto the street, where she'd have to walk to her car with some semblance of dignity. Her purse trembled in her hands as she searched for a tissue, but found only a crumpled McDonald's napkin from her breakfast that morning. The irony hit her like a slap. That morning, she had been so excited she could barely eat, dreaming of this magical night that had turned into her worst nightmare. Now she understood why she had never had real dates, why men like Diego discarded her before even meeting her. She was just a housekeeper, a girl without a college education, without money, without a bright future to offer. Her $5 remained in her purse, useless, a mockery of her own poverty. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine she was home, safe in her small room, where no one could hurt her like this. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm behind her, happy couples enjoying their romantic dinners, oblivious to the drama unfolding near the door. Marcela could hear the laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, the soft murmur of intimate conversations. Everything she had dreamed of having that night. Her heart felt shattered. Every beat was painful, every breath a struggle. "I'm such a fool," she murmured between sobs. "A fool for believing someone like me could have something like this." She wiped her face with a napkin, knowing her cheap makeup was completely ruined. Fernanda had told her she looked beautiful when they parted that afternoon, but now she felt ugly and invisible, as if she bore marks screaming, "I'm not enough for the whole world to see." The borrowed dress that had made her feel special now felt like a lie, as if she were pretending to be someone she could never be. Her tight shoes hurt as much as her wounded pride, reminding her she didn't even have proper clothes for a date in a decent place. The dream of being chosen, of being loved, slipped through her fingers like smoke, leaving her lonelier than ever. As she tried to dry her tears and gather the strength to walk to her car, Marcela didn't notice that someone had been watching the entire scene from a discreet corner table with growing concern. Gustavo Castillo had arrived at the restaurant an hour earlier for a business dinner that was canceled at the last minute and had decided to stay to eat alone and review some important documents. He was a man of routines who rarely stepped outside his social circle, but that night, fate had placed him exactly where he needed to be. For the past 45 minutes, he had been focused on his papers, taking notes and making discreet calls when something caught his peripheral attention. A familiar figure at a table by the window. Someone who seemed familiar yet different. At first, he couldn't place where he had seen this woman before, but something about the way she sat, the way she nervously moved her hands, sparked a recognition that unsettled him. He looked up from his documents and observed her more closely, feeling a strange curiosity about this woman who seemed out of place in the elegant restaurant. She wasn't the typical clientele. That much was clear, but there was something about her that powerfully drew his attention. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning when Marcela stood and walked toward the exit. It was Marcela, his housekeeper, but completely transformed. Gustavo blinked several times, unable to believe his eyes. For 3 years, Marcela had been practically invisible to him. A silent, efficient presence who kept his house spotless without interfering in his life. He knew her as a simple woman who arrived early, worked quietly, and left without a sound, always dressed in modest work clothes with her hair tied back in a practical ponytail. But tonight, she was entirely different. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face he had never truly noticed. The navy blue dress accentuated her figure in a way that surprised him, and there was a natural elegance in her movements that left him captivated. How could I have never seen her like this? He thought, feeling a mix of confusion and something deeper he couldn't identify. For years, he had lived in the same house as this beautiful woman, without realizing who she truly was. The successful businessman who could close million-dollar deals without blinking was left utterly speechless by the discovery of the beauty hidden beneath the surface of his daily routine. But what truly broke Gustavo's heart was realizing Marcela's emotional state. From his table, he could clearly see she had been crying, that something terrible had happened during what was supposed to be a special evening for her. His protective instincts, dormant for years under his exclusive focus on business, suddenly awakened with an intensity that surprised him. He saw her lean against the wall, her hands trembling, struggling to control the tears streaking her cheeks. In that moment, Gustavo Castillo, the man who managed business empires without flinching, felt something he hadn't experienced in years, an urgent need to protect someone else. He couldn't bear to see Marcela in that state. He couldn't stay seated while she suffered just a few meters away. His documents were forgotten on the table as an inexplicable force urged him to act. For the first time in a long time, business took a backseat, replaced by something far more powerful. Genuine compassion for a woman who had been under his roof for years without him truly knowing her. He stood slowly, his heart beating in a strange way, knowing he was about to cross a line that would change their relationship forever. Would he have the courage to approach her, or would he let Marcela walk out his life without knowing he had witnessed her pain? Gustavo stood by his table, paralyzed by a mix of emotions he didn't know how to handle. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts without trembling, now shook slightly as he watched Marcela struggle with her tears. For 3 years, he had lived his life mechanically. Work, meetings, more work, returning each night to an immaculate mansion without thinking about the woman who kept it that way. Marcela was simply part of the silent functioning of his home, like the heating system or the security system, something that worked perfectly without requiring his attention. But seeing her there, vulnerable and beautiful in a way he had never imagined, shattered the cold perception he had built around his life. How could I have been so blind? He wondered as he watched her wipe her tears with a crumpled napkin. The woman who cleaned his house with such care, who made his coffee exactly how he liked it, who always had a shy smile when they passed in the hallways, was breathtakingly beautiful. Her beauty wasn't the artificial perfection of the women in his social circle, but something authentic and natural that struck him like a revelation. He realized he had been living like a ghost in his own home, so obsessed with success that he had lost the ability to truly see the people around him. The businessman who had built an empire on quick, decisive actions now found himself completely indecisive. Part of him wanted to approach her immediately, to comfort Marcela and find out what caused her evident pain. But another part, the one that had dominated his life for years, told him to keep his distance, to respect the social lines that separated them, to not complicate a perfectly functional working relationship. She's my employee, he thought. What will she think if I approach her? Will she think I'm taking advantage of the situation? His Italian leather shoes remained rooted to the floor as his mind battled between instinct and reason. But every time he saw her wipe away another tear, every time he noticed her trembling, the voice of compassion grew louder than the voice of social convention. Gustavo had spent so much time building walls around his heart that he had forgotten how it felt to genuinely care for someone else. For years, he had dated women from his social class. Comfortable but empty relationships that ended when they grew bored of each other. None of those women had awakened protective urgency. He now felt seeing Marcela suffer. It was as if a switch had flipped inside him, illuminating emotions he thought were buried forever under the weight of his business responsibilities. What finally decided him was seeing Marcela try to compose herself to leave the restaurant, struggling to maintain her dignity despite the evident pain. In that gesture, he recognized a silent strength that he deeply admired, the same strength he had seen in her for years without truly appreciating it. Marcela never complained, never asked for anything extra. She worked with a dedication and grace that he now understood reflected who she truly was as a person. A woman like her doesn't deserve to suffer alone, he murmured to himself. Those words were like the key that finally freed his heart from the chains of indifference. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He didn't know exactly what he would say. He had no plan. He only knew he couldn't stay seated while she was breaking down just meters away. His years of training in negotiations had taught him to read people, and he could see that Marcela had been hurt by someone else, likely the man she was supposed to meet. The idea that someone had hurt this extraordinary woman who had cared for his home with such love sparked a protective anger in him that he had never felt before. He stood fully, left a generous bill on his table, and began walking toward her with determined but careful steps. When Gustavo approached Marcela, he could see up close the state of vulnerability she was in, and his heart ached for her. Her eyes, usually bright when she greeted him in the mornings, were red and swollen from crying. The makeup she had applied so carefully was smudged, and there was a sadness so profound in her expression that Gustavo felt an urge to find the person responsible and make them pay for this pain. "Marcela," he said softly, his voice gentler than it had been with anyone in years. She looked up, startled, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized her boss, and for a moment, she seemed to want to vanish into the floor from sheer embarrassment. "Mr. Castillo," she murmured, quickly wiping her face and trying to compose herself. "I didn't know you were here." Her voice trembled with mortification at being caught in such a state by the man who paid her salary. Gustavo could see her shrink into herself, ashamed of being seen in such a vulnerable moment, and it only intensified his desire to protect her. "You don't have to explain anything to me," he said with a soft smile that surprised even himself. "But I can't just sit here seeing you're having a rough time." His words were like a balm to Marcela's wounded heart, who hadn't expected compassion, especially not from him. Being so close allowed Gustavo to notice details that struck him even more deeply. The navy blue dress she wore wasn't expensive, probably borrowed, but it fit her so well that it highlighted every curve of her body in a way that left him breathless. Her brown skin glowed softly under the restaurant's lights, and there was a delicacy in her features that contrasted beautifully with the strength she radiated even in her vulnerability. How could I not have seen her for 3 years? He thought again, feeling foolish for having been so blind. He could smell her soft perfume, something simple yet feminine, mingling with the natural scent of her skin, creating a combination that intoxicated him in a completely unexpected way. Her hands, which he had seen work tirelessly in his home, now trembled delicately as she clutched her small purse. Gustavo had to resist the urge to take them in his to offer comfort. "Marcela," he said again, this time with more firmness, "I don't know what happened tonight, but no one deserves to be alone in a moment like this. Would you mind if I sit with you for a bit?" His offer hung in the air between them like a bridge to something entirely new and unknown for both. Marcela looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen before. Gustavo Castillo was truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time in 3 years. She stood completely still, unsure how to react to her boss's unexpected presence in the most humiliating moment of her life. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she desperately tried to find the right words to explain why she was there, crying in a fancy restaurant, dressed in borrowed clothes. "Mr. Castillo, I can explain," she stammered, feeling her world crumble even further. For 3 years, she had maintained a respectful distance from him, always professional, always discreet, and now she found herself in the most vulnerable situation imaginable in front of the man who paid her salary. Her mind raced, wondering if this could cost her job, if he would think it inappropriate for her to be in such an elegant place, if he would judge her for her evident pain. But when she looked up to meet his eyes, what she saw completely surprised her. There was no judgment in his gaze, no cold distance he always maintained at home. Instead, there was something warm, genuinely concerned, that made her heart skip a beat. Gustavo was looking at her in a way he never had before, as if he were truly seeing her for the first time. His eyes traced her face with a gentleness that made her feel exposed but not judged, as if he were discovering something beautiful that had been hidden. The transformation in Gustavo was so evident that even he was surprised by his own reactions. For years he had built a cold, distant professional persona, especially with his employees, always keeping social boundaries clearly defined. But seeing Marcela, so vulnerable and beautiful under the restaurant's soft lights, tore down those barriers in one fell swoop. "You don't have to explain anything," he repeated, his voice softer than he'd used with anyone in years. "I just want to make sure you're okay." He realized that for the first time in a long time, he genuinely cared about someone else's well-being, not out of obligation or courtesy, but from something much deeper he didn't know how to name. The navy blue dress she wore highlighted the golden tone of her skin in a way that left him breathless, and the way her hair framed her face gave her an air of natural elegance that rivaled any high society woman he had ever met. Her features, which he had only ever glanced at during their brief morning encounters, he now studied with fascination, noting the delicacy of her cheekbones, the softness of her lips, the expressiveness of her eyes that reflected every emotion like mirrors of her soul. It was as if he had lived with a work of art in his home for 3 years without realizing it existed. Like if you want to know how this night will change their lives forever. "Can I sit with you?" Gustavo asked with a gentleness that surprised them both. Marcela nodded, unable to speak, still processing the surreal situation. When he sat across from her at the small table by the window, the intimate space made Marcela even more aware of his masculine presence. Gustavo was a handsome man. She had always known that. But seeing him so close, outside the context of work, allowed her to notice details she had never seen before. His gray eyes had golden flecks that sparkled under the candlelight, and there were laugh lines around them that suggested he had once been happier than he was now. His dark brown hair was perfectly styled, but she could see a few rebellious strands that gave him a more human, less intimidating air. He wore an impeccable navy blue suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her salary, but the way he had loosened his tie and slightly rolled up his sleeves made him seem more approachable. "I was dining alone when I saw you," he explained softly, "and I couldn't help but notice something hurt you." His voice had a hypnotic quality that made Marcela relax for the first time all night, as if being with him was the most natural thing in the world. Despite the class difference that separated them, Marcela felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest at the genuinely concerned tone in Gustavo's voice. For 3 years, she had worked in silence, moving through his home like an efficient ghost, always wondering what kind of man he truly was beyond his cold business facade. Now, sitting across from him in this intimate setting, she began to see layers of his personality she had never imagined. "I had a date," she murmured finally, the words escaping in an embarrassed whisper. "But he decided I wasn't worth meeting." Her eyes filled with tears again as she recalled Diego's cruel message, and she saw Gustavo's expression harden slightly. "He sent you a message?" he asked, and when she nodded, his jaw tensed in a way that suggested he was holding back considerable anger. "Any man who treats a woman like that doesn't deserve a second of your time," he said with a firmness that made Marcela's heart race. "And he clearly has no idea what he's missing." His words were like a balm to her wounded self-esteem, but more than the words, it was a sincerity in his eyes that began to heal something broken inside her. For the first time in years, someone was defending her. Someone thought she was worth more than rejection and humiliation. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but charged with an electricity neither expected. Gustavo found himself studying every detail of Marcela's face, memorizing the way her eyelashes cast soft shadows on her cheeks when she looked down, the way she slightly bit her lower lip when nervous, the exact shade of her eyes that shifted from brown to golden depending on the light. It was as if he were seeing color after years of living in black and white, and the sensation was so intense it left him dizzy. "Marcela," he said softly, testing how her name sounded on his lips in this new context. "I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but you look incredibly beautiful tonight." The words slipped out before he could stop them, laden with an honesty that surprised even him. He saw her blush deeply, her eyes widening in surprise, and realized that probably no one had said something like that to her in a long time. Perhaps never in the way he meant it. "Not just tonight," he added, the revelation hitting him like a lightning bolt. "You've always been beautiful. I've just been too blind to see it." In that moment, sitting at that intimate table with a woman who had shared a space for years without him truly knowing her, Gustavo knew his life had just taken an entirely different course. Could two people from such different worlds find something real together? Or was this just a moment of compassion that would fade with the light of day? Marcela felt the air leave her lungs at Gustavo's words. No one, absolutely no one, had ever spoken to her with that combination of respect and genuine admiration she heard in his voice. Her cheeks burned, not just from embarrassment, but from an emotion she didn't know how to process. "Mr. Castillo, you don't have to say that," she murmured, looking down at her trembling hands on the table. "I know you're just being kind because you see me upset." But when she looked up to meet his eyes, the intensity of his gaze left her speechless. It wasn't pity she saw there, nor forced courtesy. There was something much deeper, something that made her feel like the only woman in the world at that moment. For 3 years, she had cleaned his house, made his breakfast, washed his clothes, always staying invisible, always reminding herself they belonged to different worlds. Gustavo was polished, successful, sophisticated, everything she was not. But the way he looked at her now, as if he had just discovered a hidden treasure, made her question everything she thought she knew about her place in the world. His gray eyes seemed to read every thought passing through her mind, every insecurity, every secret dream she had kept locked in her heart for years. "Marcela," Gustavo said, leaning slightly forward, "can I ask you something?" When she nodded with nervous curiosity, he continued in a voice that was barely an intimate whisper. "Could you call me Gustavo? At least for tonight. We could forget I'm your boss and you're my employee. We could just be two people who met at the perfect moment." His request stunned her so much that she was speechless for several seconds. The idea of calling him by his first name, of treating him as an equal, was so foreign to her experience that she didn't know how to react. But there was something in his eyes that invited her to take that leap of faith, to forget for a moment the social differences that normally separated them. "Gustavo," she murmured experimentally, and the name felt strange but thrilling on her lips. She saw his eyes light up at hearing her, a genuine smile spreading across his face, transforming his usually serious features. In that moment, sitting across from her at the intimate restaurant table, he didn't seem like the powerful, distant businessman she knew. He seemed like just a man, vulnerable in his own way, seeking a real connection with another human being. It was as if both had removed masks they had worn for years. The waiter approached discreetly, clearly relieved to see someone else finally seated at the table. "Would you like to order anything?" he asked with renewed professionalism. Marcela tensed immediately, remembering her $5 and the reality of her financial situation. She couldn't let Gustavo pay for her. That would be too humiliating. But she also didn't have the money for a dinner in a place like this. "I really should go," she began to say, but Gustavo gently interrupted her. "Please stay," he pleaded, and there was something in his voice that stopped her completely. "It would make me so happy if you'd have dinner with me, not as boss and employee, but as friends." The word friends hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities neither dared to name yet. Marcela looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of condescension or pity, but found only genuine sincerity. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, and when he nodded with a smile that took her breath away, she felt something melt inside her chest. "Then yes," she murmured. "I'd like to stay, Gustavo." His name sounded more natural on her lips each time, less forbidden. The waiter took their orders, and for the first time all night, Marcela allowed herself to truly relax. While they waited for food, Gustavo found himself captivated by every small detail of Marcela he had never had the chance to observe. The way she gestured slightly when she spoke, how her eyes lit up when she got excited about a topic, the soft laugh that escaped her lips when he made a comment that amused her. "Tell me about yourself," he asked, genuinely curious to know the woman who had been under his roof for years without him realizing who she truly was. Marcela was shy at first, unaccustomed to being the center of attention in a positive way. But she gradually began to open up. She told him about her family in Mexico, how she had come to Los Angeles seeking a better life. Her simple dreams of one day owning a small house with a garden where she could plant flowers. Her stories were humble but filled with a warmth and authenticity that touched something deep in Gustavo's heart. He realized that for years he had been surrounded by people who told him what they thought he wanted to hear. But Marcela spoke from the heart, without filters or hidden agendas. It was refreshing in a way he hadn't experienced in decades. Every word from her lips made her more interesting, more desirable, more necessary to him in a way he couldn't rationally explain. When the food arrived, something magical began to happen between them. The social differences faded gradually, replaced by a genuine human connection that surprised them both with its intensity. Gustavo found himself laughing more than he had in months, relaxing in a way he couldn't remember ever doing. Marcela, for her part, began to see the man behind the title, the lonely heart behind the business success. "You know what's the strangest thing about all this?" Gustavo said, set his fork aside, and looking directly into her eyes. "For 3 years we've lived in the same house, breathed the same air, been so physically close, and yet we're meeting each other for the first time tonight." Marcela nodded, feeling the same disbelief. "It's like we've been two strangers living parallel lives," she responded softly. "I never imagined that you, she corrected with a shy smile, could be so human." Her comment made him laugh, a genuine laugh that transformed his face completely. "So human," he repeated, amused. "I guess I've spent so much time being the boss that I forgot how to just be Gustavo." In that moment, with the city lights shining through the window and their conversation flowing as if they had known each other forever, both knew that this night had changed something fundamental between them, something that could never go back to how it was before. But what neither of them knew was that this magical connection was just beginning, and fate had much bigger plans for them than they could imagine. The conversation continued to flow as if they had been waiting their whole lives for this chance to truly know each other. Gustavo found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. Secrets about his lonely childhood in a wealthy but cold family, how he had built his business empire as a way to fill the emotional void he had carried since he was young. "My father never had time for me," he confessed, twirling his wine glass between his hands. "He was always too busy building the family business. And my mother, well, she preferred charity events and social gatherings over spending time with her son." Marcela listened with an attention he had never received from any woman, her eyes full of genuine compassion that completely disarmed him. "I grew up in a mansion full of staff, but empty of real love," he continued, surprising himself with his own vulnerability. "I guess that's why I became so cold, so distant. I thought if I didn't get close to people, they couldn't hurt me." His words resonated in Marcela's heart, who began to understand why he had always seemed so inaccessible all those years. It wasn't arrogance that kept him distant. It was protection against pain. The irony of their situation wasn't lost on either of them. He had grown up surrounded by luxury, but starved for genuine affection, while she had grown up with little money, but surrounded by her family's unconditional love. "I grew up in a small town in Michoacan," Marcela shared, her voice soft but filled with nostalgia. "We were poor, but my house was always full of laughter, music, and people who truly loved each other." Her eyes lit up as she recalled, and Gustavo found himself completely captivated by the warmth she radiated when she spoke of her family. "My mom always had the door open for anyone who needed a plate of food or a place to sleep. My dad worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset, but he never came home without bringing us a small gift, even if it was just a flower he found on the way." The differences between their childhoods were so stark they seemed to come from different planets. But strangely, those differences brought them closer, rather than pulling them apart. Gustavo realized that all the money in the world hadn't been able to buy him what Marcela had had for free, a family that loved her unconditionally. "I came to Los Angeles when I was 21, she continued, with just $300 and a dream of sending money back to my family. I never imagined I'd end up working in a mansion as beautiful as yours." When she mentioned his house, both felt the strange reality of their situation. They were dining as equals, sharing their souls, when tomorrow she would return to cleaning his floors, and he would return to his office. Marcela, Gustavo said softly, reaching across the table until his fingers brushed hers. Can I ask you something personal? The physical contact electrified them both, a spark of connection that went far beyond friendly. She nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Why have you never married? A woman like you. So beautiful. So caring. So real. How is it possible you're still single? The question caught her off guard, and for a moment, her defenses rose automatically, but the sincerity in his eyes convinced her to be equally honest. The men in my social circle see me as a good option for marriage and kids quickly, she explained with a sad smile. But they've never really seen me. And men from other circles, well, like Diego tonight, think I'm not enough for them. Her fingers naturally intertwined with his as she spoke, and neither moved to pull away. I've always dreamed of finding someone who loves me for who I really am, not for what I can do for them or what I represent socially. Her words were like arrows straight to Gustavo's heart, who realized he'd been searching for exactly the same thing his entire adult life, just in the wrong directions. The moment grew more intimate as Gustavo gently squeezed her hand and leaned forward, closing the physical distance between them. And you? Marcela asked with a bravery that surprised even herself. Why is a man like you dining alone on a Friday night? The question made him smile with irony. Because all the women I've met in my social circle are interested in my last name, my bank account, what I can do for their careers or social status. He confessed. I've had relationships, but I've never had a real connection with anyone. I've always felt like an actor playing the role of the perfect boyfriend, the ideal husband, without anyone bothering to know the real man behind it all. His words flowed with a brutal honesty that deeply moved her. Tonight is the first time in years I feel like myself. With you, I can just be Gustavo, not the heir, not the CEO, not the coveted bachelor. Just a man who's discovering that the most incredible woman he's ever met has been living under his roof for 3 years. Their eyes met and held for long seconds, communicating in a language beyond words. It was as if they could see straight into each other's souls, recognizing something in the other they had been searching for without knowing it. The tension between them was palpable, charged with possibilities neither dared to name yet, but both felt with every fiber of their being. The restaurant began to empty gradually around them, but they were so absorbed in their conversation that they barely noticed the passage of time. It was as if a magical bubble surrounded their table, protecting them from the outside world and all the complications their situation implied. I can't believe we're here, Marcela murmured, marveling at the surreal nature of it all. This morning, I woke up thinking you were this untouchable man, almost like a mythical figure in my life. And now, he gently prompted when she paused, his eyes shining with intensity that made her feel like the only woman in the world. Now I realize you're real, that you have a heart, that you could be hurt and wounded like any of us, she completed, her voice barely a whisper. And you, he responded, gently caressing her knuckles with his thumb, you've made me remember what it feels like to be truly alive. For years, I've existed on autopilot, fulfilling roles and expectations. But with you, I feel like I'm waking up from a long, gray dream. The waiter approached discreetly to inform them the restaurant would close soon, but neither wanted this magical night to end. They had discovered something precious together, something that transcended all the social and economic barriers separating them, and the idea of returning to reality terrified them both. Would they have the courage to admit that what they had found that night was more than friendship, or would they let the dawn destroy the magic they had created together? The moment of truth came when the waiter brought the bill and the restaurant began to close around them. Gustavo paid without Marcela even having a chance to object. As they stepped out together into the cool Los Angeles night air, both knew they had reached a point of no return. The city lights sparkled like earthly stars, creating a romantic atmosphere that seemed designed specifically for the moment they shared. I don't want this night to end, Gustavo confessed, stopping beside Marcela's car and turned to face her fully under the streetlights. She looked even more beautiful, her golden skin glowing softly, her eyes reflecting all the emotions running between them like electric currents. Marcela, I know this is complicated. I know tomorrow everything will be different, but I can't pretend what happened here hasn't changed everything for me. His words hung in the night air, laden with implications they both understood, but weren't yet ready to fully explore. "Gustavo," Marcela murmured, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I don't want it to end either. This has been the most incredible night of my life." She stepped closer to him, closing the distance between their bodies until she could feel the warmth he radiated. "But I'm scared," she admitted with an honesty that completely disarmed him. "I'm scared that tomorrow you'll wake up and realize this was just a moment of compassion, that I'm just your employee who had a bad night, and you felt sorry for me." Her insecurities surfaced. All the years of feeling less than others, of being invisible, of not being enough for anyone. Gustavo felt his heart break at hearing her fears, realizing how much the world had hurt this extraordinary woman. Without thinking twice, he lifted his hands to gently frame her face, forcing her to look directly into his eyes. "Marcela, look at me," he said with gentle firmness. "Does this feel like compassion to you?" His gray eyes shone with intensity that both calmed and terrified her. "What I feel for you right now goes far beyond compassion. I don't know how to name it yet. I don't know where it will lead us, but I know it's real, more real than anything I felt in my adult life." Their faces were so close now they could feel each other's breath, and the tension between them reached a critical point neither could ignore any longer. "Can I kiss you?" Gustavo asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion, his eyes seeking permission in hers. Marcela felt her heart stop for a second before it began pounding so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. For 3 years, she had secretly fantasized about this moment, never believing it could happen, and now that it was here, it felt like a dream she feared waking from. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible, but he heard her perfectly. When their lips met, it was as if the entire world stopped. The kiss began soft and tentative, as if both were savoring the incredibility of the moment, but it quickly deepened as they realized the depth of the connection they had been denying. Gustavo's lips were soft but firm, kissing with contained passion that spoke of years of repressed emotions finally finding an outlet. Marcela melted in his arms, all her defenses falling as she surrendered completely to the most romantic moment of her life. Her hand slid to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart, perfectly matching her own. When they finally parted, both were breathless and utterly changed. The line that had separated their worlds for 3 years had been crossed irreversibly, and they both knew it. "My God," Gustavo murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "What are we going to do now?" His question held all the complications they would face. He was her boss. They came from completely different social worlds, the expectations of society, the judgments of others. But in that moment, with the taste of her lips still on his and the warmth of her body so close, none of those complications seemed important. "I don't know," Marcela answered honestly. "But I know I don't want to go back to pretending I don't feel what I feel for you." Her words were like music to Gustavo's ears, who realized this brave woman was willing to face any difficulties to explore what they'd found together. "Then let's not go back," he decided, taking her hands in his. "I don't know how we'll make it work, but I want to try. I want to see where this takes us." Their mutual commitment to fight for what they had found was sealed with another kiss, this one deeper and more promising than the first, full of hope and determination. The Los Angeles night enveloped them like a protective blanket as they planned how to navigate the complicated waters ahead. They decided to take things day by day, to find moments to get to know each other better without compromising Marcela's job, to explore this extraordinary connection no matter what others thought. "My heart has been asleep for years," Gustavo confessed, gently kissing her forehead. "And you woke it up in a single night. I'm not letting you go now that I've found you." Marcela felt tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks, a beautiful contrast to the tears of pain she had shed hours earlier in that same place. "I never thought someone like you could love me," she murmured, and he gently interrupted her. "Not someone like me, Marcela. Me, Gustavo, the man you've awakened tonight, who you've made feel complete for the first time in his life." As they parted with the promise to see each other the next day, both knew they had found something extraordinary together. Diego, the man who had so cruelly rejected her, had inadvertently been the architect of their happiness by not showing up that night. Fate had conspired to place them exactly where they needed to be, at the exact moment they were ready to open themselves to true love. But the real challenge was just beginning. How could two people from such different worlds build a future together without society tearing them apart in the process? The days following that magical night were like living in a beautiful yet terrifying dream. Marcela arrived at Gustavo's mansion each morning with her heart racing, unsure how to act now that everything had changed between them. The first Monday after their restaurant encounter, he was waiting for her in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, prepared exactly how she liked it, a detail that surprised her because she had never mentioned her preferences. "Good morning, beautiful," he said with a smile that melted her completely. And when he leaned in to kiss her lips, Marcela felt her entire world reorder around that perfect moment. Over the next 2 weeks, they developed a secret routine. She worked as usual during the day, but in the evenings, after her official work hours ended, they stayed together on the mansion's terrace, talking for hours, getting to know each other on levels they had never imagined possible. Gustavo canceled important meetings just to spend time with her, something he had never done for any woman. They shared intimate meals prepared by him, who discovered that cooking for Marcela gave him a simple happiness that all his business achievements had never provided. Each conversation brought them closer. Each kiss made them feel more complete. However, not everything was perfect in their little secret paradise. Marcela constantly battled the voice in her head telling her this was too good to be true, that a man like Gustavo would eventually tire of playing with her and return to his world of sophisticated women and convenient relationships. "What are you thinking about when you get so quiet?" he asked one afternoon as they walked through the mansion's garden, noticing the pensive expression that sometimes crossed her face. Marcela hesitated for a moment before being honest. "I think about what will happen when you get tired of this," she confessed, stopping by the central fountain. "When you realize I'm just a simple girl who doesn't fit into your real world." Her words hit him like a slap, and Gustavo realized how much her self-esteem had been damaged by years of being treated as if she weren't enough. "Marcela, look at me," he pleaded, taking her face in his hand with that gentleness that disarmed her every time. "My real world is you. Everything else is just theater, obligations, a role I play because it's expected of me. But this," he said, pointing to space between them, "this is the most real thing I've ever had in my life." His gray eyes shone with sincerity that calmed her, but a lifetime of insecurities couldn't be healed with beautiful words, no matter how honest they were. Gustavo, too, faced his own internal battles. His parents had begun pressuring him again about marriage, suggesting suitable candidates from well-known Los Angeles families. His mother had arranged a dinner with the daughter of a business associate, a Harvard-educated woman with political connections who would be perfect for expanding the family business. "I'm not interested, Mother," he had said firmly during a tense phone call. "I've told you, when I'm ready to marry, I'll choose my own wife." His refusal had caused a family scandal that still reverberated with veiled threats about his future in the company and his inheritance. But every time he looked at Marcela, every time he saw her laugh or heard her sing softly while working the garden, his resolve to protect what they had built together grew stronger. One night, as they dined on the terrace under the stars, he took her hand and made a promise that changed everything. "Marcela, I want you to know something. No matter how much pressure my family puts on me, no matter what obstacles we face, I'm not letting you go. What we have is too precious to sacrifice for other people's expectations." His words were like a balm to her insecure heart, but also a declaration of war against a world that wouldn't easily accept them. The true test came 3 weeks after their first restaurant encounter. Gustavo had been invited to a high-profile charity gala, the kind of social event where his absence would be noticed and criticized. For days, he had wrestled with the decision to attend alone or risk bringing Marcela as his official date, knowing that doing so would be tantamount to publicly announcing their relationship. "I want you to come with me," he finally told her one afternoon as she watered the flowers in the front garden. "I want the world to know that the most incredible woman in Los Angeles is mine." Marcela dropped the hose, feeling her legs wouldn't hold her. "Gustavo, I can't," she murmured, fear evident in her voice. "I don't belong in that world. I won't know how to act, what to say, how to dress. They'll see right away that I'm not like them." Her reaction didn't surprise him, but he had hoped that 3 weeks of love and constant support would have bolstered her confidence. I don't want you to be like them, he responded, stepping closer and taking her in his arms. I want you to be exactly who you are. You're more real, more genuine, more beautiful than any woman who'll be at that gala. And if they can't see that, it's their problem, not ours. His unwavering faith in her was the anchor she needed to keep her composure. When they began walking through the ballroom, Gustavo introduced Marcela to acquaintances and business associates with pride that was impossible to hide, and gradually, she began to relax and let her natural, charming personality shine. The real surprise of the night came when Patricia Whitman, the undisputed matriarch of Los Angeles society and mother of one of Gustavo's prominent ex-girlfriends, approached their table during dinner. "Gustavo, dear," she said with the icy smile that women of her class have perfected over generations, "you haven't introduced us to your companion." The venom in her voice was subtle but unmistakable, and Marcela felt herself shrinking internally. But before Gustavo could respond, Marcela stood with a grace that surprised even herself. "I'm Marcela Dominguez," she said with a genuine, warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Whitman." Her simplicity and authenticity contrasted so starkly with the artificiality of the environment that it had an unexpected effect. Patricia Whitman found herself genuinely intrigued by this woman, who didn't play the usual social games. "What do you do, dear?" she asked, clearly expecting an answer she could use to categorize and possibly socially dismiss her. "I work in domestic services," Marcela replied without shame, "and I'm very proud of the work I do." Her brutal honesty left Patricia speechless for a moment, but then something extraordinary happened. The woman began to laugh, a genuine laugh no one expected. "My God, how refreshing," she murmured. "It's been years since I met someone so real." The exchange became the talk of the gala. As the night progressed, Marcela felt increasingly comfortable being exactly who she was. She didn't try to mimic the sophisticated manners of the other women. She didn't pretend to know cultural references foreign to her. She didn't apologize for her humble origins. Instead, she let her natural personality shine, her infectious laugh, her genuine interest in other stories, her ability to make people feel comfortable and valued. Gradually, she found herself surrounded by a group of admirers fascinated by her authenticity in a world full of pretenses. "It's incredible," she murmured to Gustavo during one of the dances. "I thought they'd hate me, but some of them seem almost jealous that I can be myself so easily." Gustavo spun her on the dance floor, his heart swelling with pride for the extraordinary woman in his arms. "They love you because you're real," he told her. "Because in a world full of masks and performances, you're genuine. That's something money can't buy." The revelation hit them both at the same time. It wasn't Marcela who needed to change to fit into Gustavo's world. It was a world that needed more people like her. At the end of the night, when the journalist asked for an official photo of them as a couple, Gustavo didn't hesitate for a second. "This is Marcela," he announced with a clear, proud voice. "The most extraordinary woman I've ever met, who has completely changed my life." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of media attention and dramatic changes in their lives. The gala photos appeared in every society magazine, and Marcela's modern Cinderella story captured the public's imagination. Gustavo faced intense family pressures, but his determination to protect and honor his love for Marcela grew stronger with every obstacle. 6 months after that first night at the restaurant, he proposed to her in the same place where they had truly met, with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother and a promise to love her no matter what the world said. "Marcela Dominguez," he said, kneeling at the table by the window as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Would you do me the honor of being my wife, my life partner, the mother of my children, and the queen of my heart forever?" Her yes echoed through the restaurant, sealing a love that had begun with pain and humiliation, but had transformed into the most beautiful story of their lives. 2 years later, Marcela and Gustavo renewed their wedding vows in an intimate ceremony in their home's garden, surrounded by both their families, who had learned to love each other. Their little daughter, Elena, played among the flowers Marcela had planted with her own hands, reminding them every day that true love knows no boundaries. Sometimes, God's blessings come disguised as pain. That night, like every night for the past 2 years, they fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful to the fate that brought them together at the perfect moment in their lives. Their love had proven that when two hearts are destined to be together, no barrier in the world can keep them apart forever. If this story moved you, leave us a comment about which part you liked best and share this video with someone who believes in the power of true love. May God bless your heart and allow you to find that special person who sees your inner light, no matter where you come from or where you're going. This translation maintains the original narrative's tone, emotional depth, and cultural nuances while converting the text into natural, idiomatic English.